Okay, perfect. Oh, hello everybody. My name is Robert Nerk, also known as Nanokan. I work for the concert art industry and for the game and movie animation industry for about 8 years, close to nine. And but today I wanted to introduce you much more to concert art and what is important about concert art and for what reason we need it. Why do we need it? How uh, we do concert art? And what is the different misunderstanding about concept art? And we go much more deeper into the process of the mindset of it and how to be a better artist. Understand what's the difference between a conceptual person versus a artistic person is, and also about the practical part. If you guys are still longer here, so let's actually do it. What is concept art? Concept art is a form of visual art used to convey an idea for use in film, video games, animation, comic books, television, shows, and so on. Your job is to design ideas, solution, solve problems, and create entertainment values. We use art as a form to convey communication. The expectation is much more like this at the beginning, where you think, okay, I join the concept art industry, I do, I need to do paintings like this, but that's way more farther from the truth. There are some stuff like this, but the senior concept artists are doing this kind of stuff. Your job is to break much more down and come with a solution to it. Do farm mailing, if I'm honest. And when it comes to the pipeline production, only seniors usually do that at the beginning, or you do it too, but very early in the very early stages. But when you join a company, they already probably decide that within in a month to do that. So it's long gone, that thing, which I explain further about it. But just keep in mind that this is way more further from truth because this is the reality of it. Like this, but more depending on the clients. Because depending on also on the company, your job is to break down all of the objects and tell what it is. But the reality is far for the truth. Your job is to add value to the project and understand what you are doing. So your basic job is problem solving, which is um, work with try to fix something, but where they have a really big problem about it. For example, this one shape doesn't work out, or all of a sudden we a male knight, the art director tells you basically it should be female, so we need to try to solve this problem to turn it into a female, basically. But yeah, let's actually go all through it. So problem solving, adaptability, research, blueprinting, clarification, communication, execution, and adventure. The examples is you work with reference, work sometimes with imagination, understanding a variety of topics, creating descriptive drawings, create and render material and objects, teamwork and feedback ability, create design, explore the world of creativity. This is some of the examples what I tried to, for example, tell you. That General Grievous was first off kind of like this kind of few drawings where they thought about him kind of like an animalistic creature. They tried to figure out, okay, what is it about it? Is he much more metal? Is he much more humanoids? And so on. Uh, much more further later on. But first off, let's actually focus on what is considered. Problem solving fix the issue. Problem solving is about creating, fixing something for the 3D, art director, and so on. It could be also for the VFX. It is much more likely where they say he has four arms rather than two, and you need to figure out where they are, what they are doing, how they work. Entertainment is about coming with something out what can inspire or make people excited about the concept, what you are doing. Imagine you do a zoo for cats. So the idea would be much more if it would be a specific prop. I would do an ice cream machine what looks like a cat and the eyes what looks like a paw. Solution, figure it out. It is about before the problem. They ask you, it is a very loud room, for example, and your job is to create noisy room. It could be indoor market or a bank. It could be anything. Depending what it is, you need to make the room or situation very noisy. For example, it is a bank. What would be there if it's very noisy? It could be a lot of machines. It could be people talking, or an explosion, or but you're going to definitely receive a brief based off of that. You don't need to worry about it. They straight up sometimes tell you it is a bank, but sometimes not, because they want to try to figure out how do you come up with this kind of ideas. So idea, your job is to come up with ideas, but the meaning is way different. Keep uh, I keep my ideas under a certain category. For example, theme, feeling, and the category itself. The category could be a gun, the theme could be mythology, and the feeling could be sad. Your job is to figure things out, then later, in a practical sense, what they are. Storytelling. If I would be your art director, how would I understand if I don't understand what it is behind all of this? Do I understand your artwork? The more I look into it, storytelling is a giant factor to communication and inspiration. And now, how to concept art. We covered what concept art is, but not how to do it. The process looks much more different than you think. We want to make it for us as easy as possible to create, because in terms of thinking and attention, we can only endure 1 to 4 hours of creative thinking every day. After this, you are going to be very exhausted and you want to take a rest or break. Or you can render also your piece because you can listen to YouTube or something else or a podcast as an example and to render your piece out. You don't need to think when it comes to rendering or refining stuff because time is sometimes a problem when we um, do certain things and when we need to think, then it's much more okay. The problem is much more if I think too much, I'm going to be very exhausted. So what am I going to do with the rest of the time? I render my piece. The main point is to understand how to be efficient in your process rather than artistic. Learn how to create efficiency in learning, which is focus on what to learn first before you do the next thing. Study, focus on what is important and understand what is less. Process, understand what, how, and when you need to do certain things in your process. Ideas, fast paced decision where you need to decide to go with it until you have a better idea what aligns much more with the project. Sometimes you can also take longer because if you are in your thumbnail process and you try to think about how to solve that problem, it's better to go with your best idea from your head and just execute it. Um, another the next one is themes. Create a short theme what can decide your direction and purpose of it. Research. Learn how to research with direction and learn how to search it. Communication. Understand how to work with people, creating a great impact to your workflow. Reference. Learning how to efficiently gather reference and sort them out. Storytelling. Learn how to tell a story as fast and efficient as possible. Feeling. Understand what you want to convey. What kind of feeling do you want to execute? Is it sad? Do I want it angry? And so on. Knowing how you do it, why you do it, for what reason, when, and if can greatly impact your way of producing things. So the process of being a concept artist is hard first, but it becomes easy with time if you have a struggle in terms of your own creative foundation. Understanding why you struggle and how you can avoid the struggle more, learning to understand why and who and where you are doing it, execute make you a good designer, learning how to research and entertain, being a team player makes you a great designer. Be precise. Understand where you want to go as a concept artist. Don't do everything. The main reason is because they question you a lot. I was formerly as an art director in an animation 3D animation series, and we question a lot of people, a lot of concept artists. For what reason are you doing it? What does the reference look like? Can you show me your reference? Maybe that's the problem. A master of many things is not a master. If you like dragons, only do dragons. If you like characters, only do characters until you are in the game, movie, or animation industry. Of course, it does not mean 100% characters. It means also um, understanding, okay, what is important first. So it's kind of like a percentage thing. If I do 80% of characters and 20% of environment, it's totally fine. At least you do majority of the time a specific thing because it's all about consistency. Concept art versus designer. There's a common miscommunication when it comes to understanding both things in it. If you ask Google, you get a common misconception depending of the company how they understand it, which is not really far from the truth, but can be distorted once you are in the industry and all of a sudden you assess that is not what I thought concept art is about. A concept designer focuses on the details of creative project, while a concept artist will create the mood, tone, broad feeling of a specific scene or character, which is the actual reality of it. But just saying, if you are a concept artist in AAA industry, which is probably the success rate to go into that is kind of like right now 10-20% of it, unless you don't you know people, uh, then you probably can jump in and if they put a word for you in it. But usually concept artists do both jobs, concept art and concept design. So let's go with concept art first. If we go with Google answer, then that basically means that concept artists are for early stages of development, where we try to figure out what kind of game, movie, animation we try to make. Mood, feeling play a big role into it, which is the truth. But now that AI exists, you take a role of a different title, which is the designer. Sometimes we use AI only for the idea because we want to get as many ideas as possible together and put it into a compilation and then we actually draw it. That is basically what I mean on this part on it. And there are many people that use it this way. Sometimes we use AI also for presentation of things because it's very important to try to make the person what is not an artist to understand my design. So it's much more arrangement of objects rather than um, we actually literally use the AI one and then we claim it and we paint it. No, We literally just do it for research purposes and idea purposes. So yeah, um, at least from my experience. Um, okay, you are in truth a designer and always going to be. We just use concept art, the word, in order to communicate to certain individual that art should speak for itself. In short, you ideate or iterates many things before it goes to pre-production. This phase of development cycle is called blue sky phase or white canvas phase, but we call it blue sky phase most of the time. Concept designer. Most of the time, we are concept designer. We try to make people understand how it works, why it works, how to then entertain it, how entertaining it is, where do we need it, why it exists, and so on. Your purpose is much more like a blueprint to guide certain people and help out 3D artists, up to animators to ensure a smooth transition of direction and execution. So here we have a complete, actually a very simplified cycle of the entire production cycle, which is when you are in blue sky production, you do most of the time concept art up to pre-production. And then the concept design starts much more. But usually in between we always switch up. Sometimes concept art, sometimes design. Um, because once we know what they want, we completely break it down. And this is, by the way, this is concept art. This is one piece that I made for. I wanted kind of like a different an hideout for a game I think called Black Myth Wukong, where you basically hang around with a lot of people, I guess. And the idea was basically a terracotta workshop, but I changed into what was previously a Buddhist temple. So it turns into a terracotta workshop. They also dice certain stuff up, sell stuff, process the dye a little bit, and here the terracotta soldiers. So it plays basically in the Quick Quinn dynasty. The other concept art is much more about the production what I did, I think 2 years ago for an indie game. I forgot the title because they changed it like a wildfire. Usually they have a really cool title, but I think it's called a set Project Nomad on it. And yeah, first I tried to illustrate, then I tried to figure out okay how it actually looks like because this and they wanted much more. A concept about a floating castle, but also it does not act kind of like for a king. It acts much more like a ballroom where people actually drink, dance, and do all sorts of stuff. And I said, and then I set up my signals basically, okay, if there are high castles, then probably a cathedral or something like that. Probably really high, huge types of bridges and so on. And this is basically what I did for the 3D part of it so that I can push it together in order to paint over it. Because in terms of concept art, sometimes it's not about a skill set, but much more the tools that is important in order that if they don't like the perspective, they want a change on it, and then I need to start all over it again. I can't listen to audio right now, but is considered just focus on world building like environments. Uh, can somebody write for me? No, but world building is kind of like at the start of the process. basically. Sky production where we start world building out. This is concept design now, and concept design is much more about breaking the objects down to for very specific reasons. Usually, most of the time, it's a character. If somebody tells you you need to do an anvil, that person is not very smart. Okay, means your boss is not very smart. Because everybody can understand an anvil, but they wanted me to do it for the purpose of presentation process. They wanted they picked some random things out rather than the most important thing. Concept art conveys an idea, yes, but it's just the start of the process to understand. Okay, how does it look like the game? How would it look like the game or the movie or anything else? And then we usually break down this idea way more further into it. The General Grievous example is actually kind of a perfect. They had a few sketches on it, and then they said, you know what? Hey, I found this in the toilet. This kind of like, what is it called? What sprays basically water? You see that it's basically like this. So General Grievous is basically for a cleaner tool, and they had the idea to turn it into a robot, basically. And then there was a guy called Feng Zhu. He went and broke all of General Grievous parts down because LucasArts said he has 4 arms, two on each side. So they tried to figure kind of what does it work like this, does it work like that, and how it moves. Does he move like a creature? Does he hump and so on? So let's actually go to the next part because we have a lot of things to get done. The process of concept art is a long process where you try to develop the initial version of a project. Never forget, you are a designer first, an artist later. You use art as a leverage to convey solution, entertainment, and problem solving skills. Your job, research, think, and present. Your job is to ask yourself the 5 V question: why, who, what, when, where. I add myself as an additional 2 questions: how and what if. Answering all of those questions lead you to a path of inspiration, solution, and entertainment. The most important one are the 5 V questions. Be a designer. Your job is not to be an artist in terms of mindset. Everything what is nature, biology, history, and science is for you to use it. Everything what you saw as a cheat, we as a designer use it. 3D, photo bashing, math painting, textures, kit bash, license pictures, in-game engine stuff, AI, which right now I would actually hate this because I don't use it at all, if I'm honest. Um, Next one. Concept art is not always about the kind of ideas you have, it's how you can execute ideas. Concept art is not always about execution, it's about how you add to the project. Concept art is not always about the project if you can stay consistent. Concept art is not always about the quality. It is how everyone can understand what it is, regardless of artist. Sometimes, if I just draw a simple card and that looks amazing, and then they use it for AI, for example, I mean, user interface. Why research is important? how can I do something if I don't know about it? Usually I spend at least a day on it. Sometimes I set up a gray box, block out of a 3D scene so that you can walk today already on it. Sometimes you need to do it yourself, but it is much more for architecture reasons. Even characters can have those. Oh, this is basically a compilation about Chinese architecture, and I tried to make kind of like a temple, and it is much more the entrance of a temple and the way how it's designed. I wanted kind of the idea with the Buddhist, but it kind of reminds you guys of something, which is this one here. This is the concept, by the way, what those ideas came from, basically. So just I wanted to understand how is this is much more India. Okay, then I thought, okay, what about this one? This is much more looks like Nepal Buddha, and that one is straight up Chinese Buddha. So I thought about different kinds of Buddha statues in order to convey my idea around. But yeah, anyway, if you struggle with idea phase in terms of reference, understand what we need to research, gathering information about the place, person, creatures, or vehicles. Many people struggle with this because they think you need the exact reference for it, or they don't write a list of things what it is about. What you see above is understandable. Sometimes I even write a list of things that my environment and characters need. So basically, good reference, in-game screenshots, photos and 3D, bad reference, other artists, and there's I think another one on the ring which is AI. Because AI can only do so much at fixing basic composition right now for us rather than ideas. They became slightly better, but only by 0.5 percentage. Just we still use them in just to get inspiration, like a mood board or something like that, like this. Because we cannot always identify what is AI and what is not, and that's the problem. So yeah. Anyway, next one. Concept art first, artist later. It is your job. Many people misunderstand the process what goes on. Your job is to get um, ideas down, not to do something for yourself. Try to understand that if I draw or paint, I do it for a team, okay? For a game, for somebody else than me. If you're the type of guy what just want to do the job, then it's not for you. Your job is to communicate with other people and much more. If you are an introvert, it's a little bit harder. But right now, because of COVID happening, it's a little bit of a shift change. But they still want some people in in house in order to do the communication part a lot more smoother. So that's why sometimes you need to relocate. If you are a person that likes to create concept art and is excited with the people around you, getting inspired by other people, this is a job for you. You are concept first, artist later. Our artistic side of it tells us it is not good enough, but when is it ever good? Try to understand your screwdriver, and your job is to fix the wheels and certain other things. In your job, you wear multiple types of hats: designer, concept artist, illustrator, designer. Trying to figure out how it works, why it works, if there's a difference, why it works, and break the design down even more. Concept art. Ideate about it, figure certain elements out for the project, blueprints, call out, exploration, the subject, what it is, and how it works. Illustrator. Creating art with storytelling and good foundational and technical skills. Design like a video game or movie. Try to understand how to work for a company. How would it be beneficial if you work for a strategy game or a third person shooter? How would the conceptual phase look like? Understand the things what is needed for the game, but do you try to produce for what niche? How would the gameplay feel? Because if it would be top down, it's a strategy game, right? So I would absolutely conceptualize a lot of stuff like that, which means design with direction. If you wanted to be hireable as a concept artist, have a project where it feels like you work for a studio. It is a very important uh, thing to understand why direction is so important, especially if you are under a tight deadline with a goal in mind. It's just to put it simple, still use everything in your arsenal, even 3D, as long as it does not break any licenses. How to steal? Many people misunderstand the phrase steal when it comes to concept art, but it is rather a combination of direction and anybody's interpretation. But what I truly mean is when it comes to research, drawing, 3D, ideation, we can see from following things: nature, biology, technology, literal science, for example, could be an airplane, and history, which means those four objects, categories. For example, in nature, we can steal from trees. Everybody can paint a tree, right? In biology, we steal from anatomy, from animals, from okay, if I want to draw a tiger, I draw a literal tiger. So I absolutely steal from an animal. Or when it comes from the technology part, I tried to make an airplane like a helicopter. So I took the chopper, rotor blades, and put it on airplane. Or for example, in the historical part, okay, if I want to draw medieval castles, which means when it comes to stealing, nature is and biology, technology, and history is a huge thing. Also, uh, there's one missing, which is usually mythology, but it can be also put into history because of religion. For example, the Nordic people have Thor and all this stuff. So Nordic mythology, for example, or Greek mythology, and so on. It is still based off of history. And yeah, destroy your pride, envy, and hesitation. Many people have issue with how we should use our tools. It is like cooking. Some people ask themselves, why do some people use a fork rather than a spoon in order to eat rice? You literally ask for your basic needs to be taken away and just use the tools what you are allowed to do in order to get the job done. Which means I can use everything here on my plugins, my filters, and so on in order to get my job done. Stop it. Use everything. You are not an artist, you are a designer. Plan things out. Decide how you want to approach why, when, how you would do it, and so on. It is important to understand how long it will take you for a certain thing. And here I show you a few things about some concepts, what we usually do in usually the usually AAA and AA studios. It can also be indie, so you don't need to worry. So it goes for everything. It just sometimes we come up with different kinds of ideas up. Some studios also demand you to paint, and some studios demand you to draw. It is how it is because of pipeline reasons. Um, if somebody comes up and paints it, it should be at least at the end for the end result. But the problem then can occur that everybody needs to do in the end line drawing anyway. So if as an example, if I if I get hired in a company and this for later. Okay, and they have, for example, here line drawing, process of line drawing. Okay, now they want then all of a sudden to paint like the craziest people ever. Something like, let's take a random picture out. Something like this. Okay, this is the texture part of it, how they want to do. You can say no to it because it can interfere with line drawing. But some creative directors are like that. They want absolutely to go from line drawing to this one. And they kind of interfere in the process. So you can say no, but you probably get fired. But there's a workaround for it from line drawing. You can always find a wrong workaround if it comes to that one. But the end goal is that he wants it like this, rather than like like this. So if I line draw, maybe I can use it this way in order to get this job done like this. So that's kind of my point what I tried to tell you if when it comes to the process of it. Some people actually interfere with the process, but usually it's only line drawing and painted underneath it and a little bit over it, and that's it. Um, because we are content artists and content designers and not illustrators. It just sometimes we need to do that for the 3D part of the reasons we want to put portraits, for example, in a game, something like that. But yeah, here are the different kinds of designs. For example, this one is for prop design. We usually try to understand, okay, for what reason we do prop design. And for example, this one is for an arcade. Basically you play around and then receive kind of like a Pokemon or something like that in order to spin it, and then maybe it turns into this one. But it's a cool idea. I like this one. Uh, Next one is about animals. Animals kind of like here's a iteration. This is a full concept about it. I would say kind of like a full concept, but I would totally say it's a full concept because there's even the breakdown are about each individual type of um, turtle or turtles. This is how creature design looks like, but this is much more for senior arts direction. And the one thing that I forgot, most of these people that I'm going to present are senior artists, okay, or much more senior level. But on the anime side of it, those are juniors basically. But it looks totally maybe okay. This is from 2021, I guess, or 26. This is 26, maybe. But okay. Just keep in mind some of those are way too professional in order to be be made like that. It is just for presentation purposes why they are such in a high quality of it. But you can do that too. But it's just quality does not always answer it. I also know some creative directors or art directors but hire people based on their line drawing rather than their painting qualities. It's totally fine. And also their ideas. You can have a very bad drawing, but if your ideas are crazy, then you totally get hired for it. It just they put you probably on the start of it until you got your skills way more better up. Interior design. This is how we design interior design basically. And this is much more prop of the interior design, but I thought it was interesting to point it out how the room looks busy. Usually you don't need to paint that amount of things over an interior design, but it is nice to tell storytelling, basically. It's for character design, and there are here and there some flaws with the presentation, but it pretty much sums up. This is considered acceptable, yeah. What's an entry-level concept artist work look like? You consider acceptable in the kunst market? Yes. For example, if I take this one, yes, because it tells me a lot of things. And for example, I know the staff, which is this one. For example, on this one, the tooth amulet. Where is it on it? I think it's on his back, but maybe he can change it also and have multiple versions of it, basically. Um, then he has something like this, but I don't know what. Okay, it's for a witch doctor, so it's absolutely clear to be on his hand. He has also a bow, but I think that was the initial idea on it. And he actually worked much more on his ideas and tried to figure out his costumes. So this is much more a very understandable character. If you would tell me what this person is immediately, then it's a good design. I know immediately it's some kind of military Russian kind of thing, like Stalker is an example, and it looks like they are into a territorial radiation environment. So this is totally can work. And I like the different kinds of versions. Sometimes, as I said, tell show don't tell, and this shows a lot. It shows, for example, the costume, the pants, this one, the military gear, how the military is set up on this. Where is, for example, the straps? But the gun, actually, on the next page, maybe how the gun looks like. But yeah, this is concept art and concept design. We try to break a lot of things down. Okay. And there's much more in terms of writing what you need to do. That design communicates biohazardous environment and gunmen. And it serves its purpose basically on this one. If he if the concept artist says no, that's this or that, then it's basically wrong on the on the communication part, right? But if he says yes, you got it, then it's good. How common are hard surface concept design are? Very, very common. Um, Actually, uh, the character design industry is much more overbloated, full of character artists. And if you do concept art, you do most of the time, usually, if your skill set is bad, um, you do a lot of props immediately. They put you into a lot of props. If they say, "Do you want to do props?" You can say yes or no. Or if they say, "Okay," despite the fact they hire you as a character artist, they come to you, "Hey, you should do props. You can try it out, but then you needed to do it for half of a year, basically, or maybe less, but it kind of varies because it goes then from prop design to environment concept art, for interior concept art, and so on, basically. And yeah, and that is kind of the problem here. So depending what you want to be specialized in, you are one of those later on. If when you are already working in the industry, you can change your path later on. So that's what I basically meant. Even despite the fact you are a character artist, they want sometimes to put you into the storyboard type of thing because it looks like, hey, you look like you can handle very well a couple of gestures. When you showed the truck, you said concept art, concept design. So from what I am getting at the moment, concept art is getting items in the world, and concept design is showing the design, and it's there an item. Again, concept art idea, concept design breakdown of idea. The end. Concept art idea, concept design breakdown of idea. Actually, let's write it down. Concept art idea, concept art breakdown of idea. Oops, design. What I'm talking about is much more the psychology and the way how it can intertwine with each other. Okay. So in case if you get confused, there's a lot of psychology going on, and sometimes it's the same words and the same terminology are sometimes used in order to depict but different things and different directions. Okay. So keep in mind that concept art is always has been an idea phase, whereas concept design is always about breaking down the idea. Just to showcase it again, this is concept design. This is little about this one plant and how it looks with tentacles and all this stuff. So it gets very weird. You see the breakdown of the colors, then you see the writing parts, how it do suction cup works. So I wrote even this one part down. Then you see a reference on it where I break it even more down into different how this one inside looks like. If it opens itself up, you see kind of like a plant. How does this plant look like, and so on. This is concept design, basically. I literally try to break it for you how this one plant works for you. This is why it's concept design. Versus concept, okay, this is the idea about it, and it works like this. I thought about this and that stuff. So it's all about ideas rather than how it works. Sometimes they can ask or say how does it work too on this one, but it's not about breakdown. Much more, does it is it logical? Okay, don't worry, I'm going to explain this one way more crazier here. Okay, so this is part one, and we are not even halfway finished. Um, where are we? Okay, don't try to be a master at everything. Choose what you want to be and choose and think about it for a week, at least what you want to do. You need to fall in love with the craft, not with the artwork. Understand why you want to go this career path. For what reason? If there's money, forget it. If there is passion, it depends. What kind? If you are really need to take you need to take everything with a grain of salt and judge it, but not too early. Try it out a week. It is not a waste, a month neither. I just realized how many people use the word design in parallel to illustrating. At least it becomes clearer to understand it now. Yeah, because it's a terminological word, terminology, which means I use a word in order to describe different contexts. When I was working in the movie industry as an UI and actually also in the game industry as a UI and UX artist, I understood that some people talk the same thing but use different words for it. which completely I need to range my mindset and ask them all the time. Oh, so you mean this and that? Oh, yes, absolutely. And the same can go for concept design, but concept means idea. Okay, first off, it's just an idea, but you illustrate. Basically, that's why they say that's just a concept, and just to keep it in mind. But when it comes to concept design, because it's in both words and concept art, it's literally a job description. Your job is to create ideas, break down ideas, and so on. Here are a bunch of tricks and tips and tricks that I wrote for you guys down. And let's actually tackle all of those up, okay? So, let's go for it. Avoid artistic reference. If you're really bad in your journey and you always try to focus on the same art style or different types of art styles, um, you should avoid artistic reference. But if you actually focus on a master, then you can totally study him. You can totally use his references. Just don't use it all the time. Also use some real art. I mean, photograph type of stuff, 3D. Even use everything in your arsenal. So that means don't only use that one. Okay. Draw frontal or side view first if you ideate. Make it as easy as possible for to design. 4. Do proper research. 5. Understand your task. 6. Don't talk around the bush if you present. 7. Try to understand how everything works and why. 8. Humble yourself. Try to understand rather than force it. 9. Ask yourself who is it if you design. 10. Learn how to be a team player. 11. Have fun in terms of creation, ideation, exploration. 12. Think before you do. 13. Present in less than a minute. Show, don't tell. 14. Make people excited in 1 minute or less. 15. Understand your task. 16. Learn the difference between short sketches and long. 17. Learn the difference between speed and precision. 18. Learn the difference between early, late, sketch phase. Understand your target audience. Understand why and for who you are doing the concept. Will we have access to the slideshow after the stream? Yes. And matter of fact, I actually going to post it straight up here. All the material, so you don't need to worry about it. It just takes probably kind of like 10 minutes or maybe 20 minutes in order to upload everything. But yeah, I can try it. It just probably the videos are a problem, but I'm going to showcase later on, and that's the thing. Where was I? Understand for who you are doing the concept art, have a goal and project in mind, steal from nature, biology, history, and science. You don't need a call out if you're drawing a fire distinguisher. Just put a reference on a side unless they ask you off, but then redesign it maybe. By the way, call out means full concept, which means this. If they literally ask you to do something like this, okay, this is the call out. And call out sometimes is front, left, center, back, and side view, and so on. So it could be a color could be much more this. This is a call out here. Okay. Understand why you're doing to have a call. Stay from nature, biology, science. You don't need a call. Yep. Ideation, exploration, call out, presentation. Have fun. It is a job where you draw and paint. Understand that you are not serving yourself. You don't doing it for a team. Be a teamed player, understand what kind of role you have. Be a specialist first and a generalist later. You have plenty of time, play the safe game. Understand yourself why or for what reason you do certain things. If you have no clue, use reference. Information is key. Try to figure everything out about the subject. Understand who needs your concept. Understand the different kinds of department your concept goes to. Create short story briefs to make yourself understand why it works. Draw everything and have fun. If you have an art block, take a break. If you have an art block, make a list of things what you like to draw. Try to be in a position of the receiver who gets the concept. You're a concept first and artist later. Research, think, and present concept art. Think, break it apart, explain, design. Design, think, and present concept design. Think about how your design benefits the game or who. Answer always the big five V questions: why, who, where, when, what. Design like it is for a video game or someone. Concept art is self direction, they don't demand beauty. Draw slow to understand, draw faster if you want to explore shapes. Draw slow for precision, draw faster for exploration. Use everything that you can get your hands on in order to do your job. Clear your mind and prepare yourself how many pages you're going to fill up when you draw. Create a plan for you before you tackle a project. Also plan out how you want to approach. Take reference how you want to present. Have a balance between information, reference, and concept. Show, don't tell. Your concept sometimes speaks louder than you. Understand why certain people are designers. Understand the difference between an expert and a generalist. Storytelling is key. If you can identify a concept with more than 3 words, then it's a good design. So, if sci-fi is harder than fantasy, but fantasy is harder than history. Thinking outside the box, which means immerse yourself into the concept, try to see it with different eyes, but the concept, be the concept. Have a clear goal. Have a coffee or something to drink, which I'm doing right now. Listen to music while you walk. Close down the internet while you walk. Listen to podcasts while you walk. Upset nothing to be finished today unless you know what to do. Set a timer on your task where you focus. Set your mind up for failures. Enjoy the process in a long run. Rome wasn't built in one day. I also have some suggestions here. Usually, when I was an art director, I created some briefs all the time, or multiple of my people. And this is sometimes what I do to people so that it's for them easier to understand what they need to design. This is for you guys, and if you guys want, you can completely use this one. It's just basically an idea about a coral reefs. Imagine underwater sea level was over on top of it, and now it's kind of like an avatar thing. It removes the stress of paper and drawing. Just zone out part of your brain. Okay, part one is finished. I think we should do a small 5 minute break because I'm just talking over an hour and I need to refresh my mind. Okay. So we're going to take a 5 minute small break here. And then we tackle the rest of the mindset part of concept art. Okay. So that it is a lot more easier for you guys to understand. So 5 minutes as of now. Oh, nice, nice. We are finally at part two, which is much more about the mindset and how concept art is being produced. And I'm going to tackle kind of a few questions here. What is it about it again? But much more mindset. Okay. All of those things is about your own mind. To understand, it's much more simple. It's much more breakdown. Okay. how it happens, why it happens like that, and so on. Because it's a little bit, it was a little bit too complex in the first round, but also very short on time. It kind of said, I said, concept art is about this and that. Why? What is the difference? Why research is important for concept art, and so on. Now we tackle much more the mindset of it, which is what is it about? Concept art is about visualizing the product, needs, ideas, problem, and solution. Concept design is about breakdown of the idea to provide various other jobs context. Which means when you use art as a leverage to communicate, art is communication, concept art is idea, so on, you're a concept artist. If we use design to break down and give people meaning, solution, material, and context, you're a concept designer. Which means in production, in concept art, which is the first thing that we do, is phase number one. And those are the different kinds of phases that can happen throughout different studios when it comes to concept art production. Okay. So first off, usually when it comes to white canvas production or blue sky production, which is all the way in the beginning, we always try to create ideas. Despite the fact that Taylor's themes, but also we can get briefs, and then after the brief we get research, and after the research we get reference and visual, and we do then iterations. Basically we do a bunch of characters or environments or props in whatever our position is in order to get our mind going on. Okay, so that's why the first phase is all about iteration. We try to get as many possible ideas as possible in order to get our job done. Some people actually do it with one or two because maybe they get the best ideas out of their heads, or maybe the bad ideas out of their heads first in order to do just one thing. And some people actually do the opposite of it. They make many bad ideas and but then combine it together to create great ideas. Which leads then to phase two, which we try to solve the problem by basically exploring our different kinds of designs and concepts in order to break it down, to check up on it, what is missing, what can be changed, what could be a better idea. Then we showcase it basically, which is when you look into the days, this is everything happening between Monday to Wednesday. So phase one and two usually happens at this time. Because then, okay, we showcased it to the art director or lead artist, or it could be also the creative artist, depending if it's AAA or AA or indie, or there are not many people right now into the product. You meet all three of those kinds of people. And then after that, after Wednesday, is phase three happening where you submit your solutions, basically your full concept. And you try to conceptualize it as best as you can out. Sometimes it can also happen that this entire process takes kind of like 1 to 2 weeks, I guess. And yeah, basically in the third thing, we always try to focus on the full concept, where we set everything up immediately at day one, and then we only need to refine it. It's being recorded, I think, on Twitch and live on Twitch. So I guess the recording is still there then later on. Don't know it. But the slides, everything here, you guys, I make sure that you get it today. And if not, just hit me up um, on the DMs, and then I send you guys everything. It just I wish it would be a easier way because the server is closing down, I guess. And yeah. Anyway, phase three, submit solution or concept. Approval that we already explored enough of ideas, and then we can refine and then present it again, and then it is basically taken away from us. And then the whole entire thing goes back to phase number one. So this is basically a basic pipeline what explains to you how it can usually work in the game or movie industry. Now let's go a little bit back to concept art. Concept art is about three words: design, think, and present. Because our focus is concept art, not concept design, but I want you guys to understand the difference between it in order to differentiate from each other. Okay. So let's go to design. Design is about many aspects of integrate philosophical standpoints of creating ideas. Means I research, I brief, I get a brief or I write my own brief down. I try different approaches and then I try to create something out of it. Design means not always drawing. Design means also research. The moment you try to research your design, it's design. Or the moment you try to figure out ideas, it's design. You need to open yourself up to the possibilities of learning through design to create and also through your research. You want to know before you create. What is hard to know? How accessible is this information? Think. Thinking is all about creation of the solution, problem solving, and communication or communicative language to reduce brain power. Which means if I write down my ideas, explain my ideas, think about it in or analyze those ideas if they can work together, I have a way more easier time. What have I done? Is it good? Does it work? Is it right? Does it make sense? Is it readable? How does it work? Understanding why and how and question yourself through your own process is an important aspect of life and concept. Presenting is a way to showcase to a non-artist your entire idea. You can make a bad design but good presentation. It can still get you green lighted. Green lighted means basically people, your boss tells you, yep, it's good enough, let's send it to the 3D artist. Or it's good enough, now you can go to phase two and explore much more the ideas. So it's much more about showcase, presenting, graphical understanding, and readability. Understanding how you showcase something and think it with the mindset of a non-artist can make you understand your own solution. Which means, um, if I stop being an artist for a moment and we think of it like it's a job or it's something different and it's not fun at all, and I need to look at it, how long are people looking at it? And if it's not for a company, would I love to look at it? Would I like this drawing painting? If I go to X or Twitter or to Instagram, how fast do I scroll over a lot of pictures basically, and that is much more the question here what I ask. Which is approximately not even a second. Do people tend to look at it for like 1 to 4 seconds? That's the attention span of a doom scroller, basically. But sometimes, okay, it's so great that we scroll back up and then we look at it for like 5 more seconds. And then if it's really, really amazing and you try to do something like that, and if you're an artist, you look at it much more. So, um, that's how it works when it comes to attention span. Okay, next one. Sometimes concept art, concept design has been thrown together, but they mean different things. Sometimes, or most of the time, you do both. Concept art, create, think, present, and then you get your design. Concept design, break down, which means blueprinting, read, problem solve. Yeah, some tips and tricks. You can take much more than a week to conceptualize. Decide and approve yourself on decision. Use reference, no artist, at least at the start. Some concepts do not need a full concept, but a collage. Don't rush everything is a process. Respect the pipeline, which means you respect your own process or understand what do you need to do one after another in order to do it. You you are not the only person work on your concept like it's a teamwork. Think before you approve. Sometimes early concept sketches can help you out. And here are some my two different kinds of pictures. Actually, it's the same concept. It's only what showcases the difference between concept art and concept design. Again, which is this one. I try to figure stuff out how I attach this one prop into this one Chinese building, which is it should be somewhere on a gate, basically. It's a JPEG file. I'm going to send everything as a JPEG file, so you guys don't need to worry about it. Okay, we have iteration in concept, explaining what this object is. It's a mortar cannon. And then explore much more the idea about should I put a dragon on it or should I completely change it into a European cannon? And then I thought about, okay, if we push it, how much in terms of, in terms of direction it's going to be up. Uh, and I thought about this dragon goat logo on the side where it kind of looks interesting. Maybe a fish called dragon or something like that. A combination between a fish and a dragon, a Chinese dragon. And yeah, because it's a meaning basically. So the fish, there's a story about the fish wanted to go upstream to become a dragon, basically. So it has sometimes the fish is some becomes the dragon, basically. And yeah, also it's also a Japanese storytelling kind of ish thing in mythology about the fish koi. So it that story exists both in China and in Japan. So consider when I already did a cannon, for example. Now it's time to completely look inside of the cannon. How does it work? Does it shoot out the way how to shoot it out? How to open this on the back basically up? And is this a cannon thing? How does it work? Do I basically open this one up? You know, it's like this, and then it closes back on it. So stuff like that basically. What we do in concept design. We literally try to understand, hey, try to make them believe it's kind of like a physics game in concept design. Rather in concept art, it's idea. This is, I need to explain the physics of this world, or I need to explain basic. I completely need to break it apart for the 3D artist so that it makes sense. Because if I design a gun, okay, let me just think of it. If I do a gun, and actually this happened to me with the 3D artist, and I still have this gun on ArtStation. I can actually show it. Just let me log in. Okay, nice. So I got the task to do it for a movie, 3D movie, and I did two guns, and yeah, I showcased it also in the chat. But here's this gun, and basically, what spots the mistake, because it was a huge mistake. The barrel where you put your gun in when you open up, basically like this thing would be much more that it has the function of pushing it kind of here in, and the 3D artist didn't understood this at the time, but then it also didn't make sense because it pushed it completely far away out, and then it didn't look like it walked. So that's a massive problem. So in order to fix it, we thought about, okay, you know what? Uh, let's look at let's replace it with a normal barrel, kind of ish, like the Cowboys has it, and then we basically looked all over the internet how this works, how they open up this hey, and I forgot what it's called. Um, and somebody tell me what it's called. I forgot. Got this. It's only this part here where you open it up and close it, and then you put your bullets in, basically. Chamber, yeah. That sounds quite fun if you don't have time constraints. You always have time constraints, but that's the cool thing about it. You are not really that stressed. Basically, cylinder. That's another one. So time is not really an issue. It's just scribble a little bit, and then because even I showcased this concept, by the way, and they told me that's a lot of details. You should push the quality a little bit lower. So basically, they asked me to base paint it, and I did it then here because this was the concept of the gun, which I basically looked at it in I saw this World War II gun from the Germans, and I completely forgot what it's called. But it has all of the text already in the concept design phase rather than in the concept art phase, because this is concept art phase, but I still tried to find a solution for this chamber, and rather than making a new concept, I told the 3D artist just replace it with a normal old chamber cylinder, and then take this one part underneath away, because then we can totally open it up from the front rather than from the back. So this part goes up, or I mean much more from the side, like this, so that it opens both sides up and you can put your bullets in it. And yeah, those are the kinds of things what can happen in production, basically. A lot of issues. Yes, it is the task of a concept artist to come up with colors, with the moods and all that stuff. They wanted a cyber, it's already called that way, untitled cyber western project. That's what they called it. I don't know. Apparently, the movie company didn't thought about the title and they went with it, UCV, and I guess it is a thing. So it was like a cyberpunk thing, but also like Star Wars, and in the same time, it was also like jungle. So it was an Indiana Jones in space with different planets, and it was about the revenge story. I don't know anymore. I forgot it. Or maybe it was Star Wars. I don't remember anymore. But it was definitely not Star Wars. Anyway, let's actually focus back to it. Content artist, why and how we learn it. So it's not about this is much more for environment, by the way, but it can be also automatically transitioned to characters if you use specific words for it. Okay, so yeah, there's how to create environments. What is it about? First of it, how to learn it. Why we learn it is the bigger answer, bigger question to it. And it's about better transition to characters and beyond. Visual understanding, prop fanatic, perspective, fast with many lines, slow with less, automatic line theory, organic versus hard surface, open to mistake. Hard surface means, by the way, metallic stuff. Hard surface means also stuff like what has a strong surface, basically, and is not like a tree bark. So organic means flesh or fire or nature. The hard surface means science. Uh, you are going to be much more open to mistakes if you draw a lot of environments because you basically scribble the hell out of it sometimes. And if you get and understand how it works, you scribble even way less from it. But the main point is at least you understand why we need to understand concept artist is important and why we're going to learn this. And it's all because of all of those things. How to create environments. What is it about it? It's about creating a sense of immersion, storytelling, place of interest, and logic. Especially this one, place of interest. Um, we have most of the time on different occasions promise with portfolios where they create a place of interest or do not create a place of interest at all and don't take the reference from 1 to 100, which I explained then later on. Just keep in mind that some people do not do places of interest where in many different scenes where the character interact with each other, the other one buys. If it's a market, for example, what would you do in how many people would you place in a market, for example? How would they interact? So yeah, this kind of places of interest. But the next one completely hits hard because logic in concept art is so important. You need to make people believe that this works and this does make sense. So you're basically creating your own physics, but not really. It kind of is half 50-50, or you create a logic for other people in order to make them understand the concept. And yeah, which is again the same thing, the same sections. Uh, but in environments we do we have three things to choose from, which is nature, indoor stuff, and architecture, which we create a bunch of buildings in a scene, basically. Um, the next one is the 5 questions, why, who, where. Also, don't forget the category about it. It can happen that there's more to it, because when I draw characters, props, environments, each come with their own problem solving and solutions to it, and in how to research and how you create. Which later on I'm going to be probably breaking it a little bit more down. So let's go, for example, in path of execution. Path of execution. First, we do a world building. World building means a lot of ideas being thrown out with a bunch of sketches or paintings that have probably nothing to do, but if we arrange them in the right way, we create basically a world out of it. And then we create basically idea, iteration, solution, exploration, solve the problem, presentation, and we approve it. And then we need to correct everything. It's a different full concept art phase. Okay, like the previous one, but it basically makes you a little bit more understandable why so many companies exist in the first place. So yeah. Um, Another thing is what I completely forgot to mention is when we look at this and we try to understand why concept art is, why we learn it is the reason it's all about the path of being an artist. You don't need to be a master at everything, but a master. Because later on, you're going to be a master at everything probably in 40, 50 years. And you can totally paint and draw for like a year and already are good enough. One of my students, it's kind of interesting. I want you guys to guess how many years has he drawn, especially when it comes to being an artist. Okay, if I try to find a really good. Yeah, I sent you guys right now in the chat a bunch of sketches and guess how many years, and even here on it. How many years has he? I see one, two, three, four, two. That's okay. I'm going to read it. The time it was posted, he didn't had a year. He had 8 months, basically. And this is one of my students. He never painted, and he started with basically with my um, um, mentorship out, and I basically told him exactly what he needs to do. Despite the fact it's very frustrating for him, but he gives himself not too much credit, and I said you should totally give yourself so much credit because you look like you're painting for 2 3 years, and which is insane. Exactly. But this happens when you have at least 4 hours of your time and then another 4 hours to spend on something else, draw whatever you like, then 4 hours of fundamental. So it's together like between 4 to 8 hours, but sometimes even lower than that. It can be only 4 hours in just drawing and painting and just focusing completely hardcore on somebody's artistic stylization because what people make the mistake is if they learn art, they choose a chest amateur. but you need to choose a chess master, okay? Regardless of it, you try to figure him out for months and years, but then it actually clicks, and then it works totally perfect for you. If and also you can switch a master every single time out every year, so that you learn something new every single year. You learn quality from him, you learn perspective, and this kind of study where you study another different artists, it's called master study, because we study masters, right? And that is the reason why sometimes the way how you when it comes to even concept art and all this stuff, it's not always about big giant fundamentals. It's sometimes about also being exposed to those foundations when you draw. And you're being the more you draw, yes, the better it gets. But regardless of it, some of the fundamentals can be also learned without needed them so much to do, because you are being exposed more and more to it the more you do stuff. Of course, it comes to characters or environments. So, but up to the next thing, which is terminology. Sometimes one word means two things. Sometimes two words mean one thing. World building. It is the idea of exploring the concept of cohesive togetherness in a direction of creating an IP, a world, characters, food, heritage, symbolism, a journey of what can stick and what's not. So basically, what can also be used in a context of research for creating a product. Which means world building is all about creating this. It's a world. There are different kinds of pillars and structures about what a good world building can be, but depending with the context of a conceptualized person or artist, it is different. For example, start with characters and a problem. Reveal the world gradually. You can actually do also the opposite, where you paint, for example, a bunch of environment and then you create a character based off what you see or the culture what you create. Even the buildings, for example. Um, and many more things, of course. But I think it's pretty much explanatory, self-explanatory, that world building is much more creating worlds. Your own world, maybe, or maybe somebody else's world, which also translates to your own IP. And IP means inter something, not internet protocol. God themselves. Intellectual property. Yes, thank you. So basically, imagine this on a canvas. When you draw, you open up the world yourself, which is this is already sketching a page of those things, basically. On to the next one. Iterate sketching the same idea repeatedly. A piece of canvas with many things on it, characters and no image, which we don't have images of it, but the way how you can explore an idea throughout the entire system can basically give you a much more better direction of what kind of piece you want to produce. And that is regardless of it. Okay, if you don't get the buildings and you want a bunch of buildings to create in perspective and all of those other complex stuff, so where do I take it from? Of course, I need to explore those buildings out first before I even try to make a massive big scale kind of environment. And that is very important. So you need to understand that there are many different ways how to create something, especially even in landscapes, even and what to create in environment, and it goes for characters too. For characters, it's much more a job. Okay. For example, if we take it in environment, we have different kinds of ideas where we can take it from in nature and landscapes wise what it can be. Most people in environment, because of the amount of organic shape when it comes to random stuff, um, it is always a control. Okay, in organic things you always have control usually because it already looks in 3D versus hard surface stuff. It's not always that case. So environment always has a certain control over shape and design language, basically, because it's most of the time nature if you draw natural things. And if you draw into stuff, it doesn't have so much control. So it really depends what you draw and for what reasons. If you draw a bunch of bugs, then okay, creature design is very organic. Unless they wanted to put some sci-fi things on it, which also can work, by the way. So basically what I'm talking about is design language. The purpose of it is to creating identity, communication, mood, make art coherent, helps the viewer to understand the message. Mostly used in architecture but can be used in every aspect of art. How? Because of visual principles, which means contrast, balance, rhythm, hierarchy, unity, proportion, pattern. Contrast is about making elements stand out. Balance is about symmetry or deliberate imbalance. Rhythm is about repeating patterns that guides the eyes. For example, if I make a ball what is bigger and becomes smaller, or if the pattern is always going to be the same regardless of it. So it's always a repeatable thing in sizes and length. Hierarchy, what is first, what is after, like a pyramid. So basically, if I create even a ball like this and it goes smaller, this is hierarchy. Unity, making everything fits like it belongs together. Uh, like a door, for example. I push this door on it, and this is kind of a unanimous thing, but basically works. It could be a small door, or it could be a big door. It just depends how it looks. The next one is proportion, of course. You can play around with the proportion even, for example, when it comes to those design visual principles of it. For example, it could be tall like this, but which is a door, and then it looks like the people are this small and they just go straight into this building basically. I mean door. So yeah, it can happen many different things based on this kind of principle. It's always take in mind that we use size and sometimes we use length and width and height and even the brush itself, how small it gets, how it changes even the function of it. Which means even a shape like if I completely change, for example, the shape up, I can use it in a way to actually describe many different things a lot more easier. If I push it like that in the middle, I can make a silhouette of a bunch of buildings. looking into the horizon. There is a path, basically. The next thing is pattern consistent repeated objects, which is straight up what I think I explained, but let's do it again. It's just the same thing over and over again. This is a pattern. You can even make the pattern even more interesting by pushing stuff like this up. Okay? And that basically sums it up for the visual principles, what define most of our design. You can actually Google visual principles or even composition. There are principles of composition or principles of design. That is, everything is Googleable, and you can look how contrast reacts, how balance reacts, for example, and so on and so forth. Which now let's go to the process of design execution. Okay. And on this point, design execution is about the research and the thought process of yourself. Because many people, the way how they use, for example, reference is different. But let's kind of look of in it as a design. How does it work? It's a process of finding design. Design is about, okay, inventive, combine, and imagination. So if I want to find a design, and design means something, a combination about certain elements that can work together, which means in an inventive way is design based off of research, which how it looks like if I change something up and when I use it. Which I mean, if I draw, um, if I combine two references together, I get something out completely different than I try to invent it based off of shape, for example. But I use this only from imagination. So I use reference here for shape reasons, and I use when I try to invent something based off an object, I get a different result. So what I mean by this, if you look, this is the inventive way. Look at this shape here. It looks like a helmet in front and like a visor. This can actually help me out when I look at reference, and this is one way how I look at it to see what can I do with it. Is this a neck piece? But because it's in the opposite way, I can probably use this as a neck piece, and that is the main point of being very inventive with your references in terms of finding design, because it's all about reference. How you see your reference determines actually the way how you um see that. It's just to have an easy time with it. um think about, this is not the actual object, this is not a helmet, but it can ease sometimes your directions, basically. For example, this tube. This looks very interesting. Where would I put it, for example? If this would not be a jet helmet, okay? Where would I put it in? Where would those tubes go in? Maybe on the back, or maybe this thing is kind of like a system on the back itself, and then it has a tube on it, which basically, rather than breathing, they get their CO2 and all of this stuff from the bag itself, which is injected into the lungs and it goes down. Because sometimes, what if they are into a space where they cannot breathe through their mouths, basically, but they feel like they are dying, basically. But this is a completely different type of thing. It's basically storytelling. I try to tell myself small little stories how it can work in order to find ideas and how and where do I put it. So inventive is much more design based off research, how it looks like if I change something or play with it. Combine is about two or three more reference or words together and what creates an element. So it's a word play to find design. Imagination is all about shape, principle of design, where do I take it from, which is much more shape play. I try to play around with my shape, but using most of it creates an idea all the time. Okay, so if we go back to the process of finding design, is you can find design in multiple ways. So you don't get always the straight answer, which is kind of the complex type of issue when we create concept art. But when it comes to the process of finding it out, it's much more also about the process where it came from, which is much more okay. What do I write down when it comes to the idea, which is an environment? It's all about history, culture, nature, time, theme, mood, shape, which creates an environmental design. How about the character in terms of design? Again, history, culture, heritage, time, theme, mood, shape. This creates design. So if I find a culture fit based on the reference, I have an easier time to design this character. If I find the history based off of this, or if I read the history based off of it, it's a lot more easier. If I find the right shapes for it, it's a lot more easier to draw it. But this one helps me to give, or much more like this, gives me context and actually to execute it. So this is the part where I usually execute stuff. If I find the right shapes, the right mood, the right theme to it, I'm free. I can try to invent stuff. But if I find this as a reference, and each of those have a different category, I have a lot more of an easier time to invent myself into characters. So basically, your original characters, OCs, also known, which also leads to a different kind of idea, which, as you know, in production, there are different kinds of rules, which are depending what you're going to do in concept art. Okay, so your job is when it comes to stealing stuff or much more the way how you use references as a mid artist, you kind of combine ideas together because you have a way more easier time. Um, and when it comes to ideas as a junior artist, where this is the first position what you have, you kind of you look at other inventions. So you're not going to draw everything from imagination. Okay. If I combine something a helmet like this and I try to put a food dispenser on it, who knows, maybe a pill just to put it in his mouth or something else or a headset itself. Um, I need to find exactly that headset and I'm sorry, and try to invent it together. But it's never going to be a shape invention. Sometimes, at least most of the time when you work for AAA or AA, and sometimes even indie, because indie relies much more on about imagination and combination, versus invention is key point. As an example, Assassin's Creed. We have as an environment, for example, um, Cuba in an Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Okay, So we we already have history. We already have the culture about it. We already know what kind of nature is there, what time it is, what in which time zone it plays. Can play in the 17th centuries or 18th one. And there's the golden age of Paris, basically. And we can even put different themes on it. For example, it's a scene where there's a marriage rather than something else. And we can even change the mood about it when we play with different kinds of themes and put fantasy into it. So it can happen that you are you try to invent as much as possible, and that's basically it. When you think about a junior learns how to take from real life. Okay, first. That's what I try to tell you guys. Before they try to trust their imagination. Why is it so important? Well, basically, companies do that. But why are they doing this? Can somebody answer that? I'm going to really read the answer, just bullet answers. Just I give you guys like 10 seconds to answer it. Why junior artists learn how to take from real life first in order to create and combine ideas. Okay? To build visual library because of interest more than rooted in reality. It's because of stems from reality itself. The first answer was the right one, to build actual visual library and to understand the context of real life world too. So both answers, because of interest worlds are rooted in reality. That's actually the truth. Then, and they always do that to juniors. And then we draw. Okay, let's redraw a bunch of buildings, like this magic tower, right? But where does it come from? If you don't showcase a reference and tell, you say, I don't know, it just came from this one. Okay, at the beginning, that is totally fine. But what if we are in pre production, as an example, and they already know and established everything, and now you don't know how to explain your own concept? That's going to be a problem then later on, because where does this shape came from, and this building, and the walls, and for example, this other type of things. Where is the sword even came from? If the product, and it also depends on the product. If the product is cartoonic, it's always about big giant shapes. It's not really that crazy rooted than in reality, but you deal with kind of different products depending what your um, artistic stylization is. So if your style is much more like Disney and Overwatch or World of Warcraft stuff, then you are kind of like a cartoonist. Even when it comes to Epic Game stuff, you are a cartoonist. That's how it works in the West. But I got hired from the Eastern uh, game development side first, which means I dealt with a lot of reality, but also very inventive in terms of arrangement when it comes to environments. Because they asked me literally to create a city. So I need to arrange where I find the marketplace, where I can find the bank, where I can find different kinds of people, where I find the quest giver, and where I find the guilds, what give out those quests, how does those buildings look at, and so on. So artistic stylization, depending how much artists do they want in terms of style, the more style you have, which means the more important it is to be inventive. But if you are grounded in reality and you get hired for your your stuff off your visual library. It's probably sometimes, not most of the time, usually, you probably need to draw realism a little bit, but not all the way though. And just because if you draw, of course, you do concepts, right? About bugs and environment and character stuff, but they never put you in all of those three categories, unless it's like blue sky phase, which is straight up in the beginning, which just takes a week or two in order to establish, or sometimes even a month. It can also happen that they don't care at all and just go for it for like 3 months, just to invent a lot of stuff. And yeah, so to sum it up, you are a designer, not an artist, only to communicate ideas. Okay, design is about, again, research, idea taking, writing down stuff, explore ideas. Think, think part is about, is it good? How do I combine? Is it too much? Present. Show, don't tell. On this part, I draw, I paint a presentation, I set up the presentation, and so on. So, what did I wrote just right now here? So, your purpose is to write a lot, think, and explore a lot of ideas. Draw, ideate, iterate, explore. Ideate is about ideas. Iterate is about exploring this idea more, and explore is a much more exploring that when you change that one. But usually, iterate and ideate is the same word. It really depends because of terminology changes from each um, studio sometimes. And here we have a bunch of process of ideas. Okay, it's all about gathering references and how you see ideas in those references. So seeing an object and imagining it to be something different. So it's kind of like imagination design. Okay, exploring the shape of an object that you are reference is combined design. We have it all here. Okay, drawing based off the reference and adding details, things like props, pattern, shape, composition is inventive design. So, how to take ideas from reference? Basically, taking one part of it, of the reference, and using it for something else. Taking literal from the reference and adjusting to fit. Scale, move, distance. Seeing interesting shapes, taking it literal one to one, which most of the time studios demand from you, if it's actually a picture. Combine reference together. What if it has something different and you tell yourself what it is to add in the reference? Which is basically this visor helmet, which I can maybe turn into a medieval helmet. Which means a redesign, this is the literal way of it, and this is the from imagination. I mean, I have only a kiwi, and I literally try to understand the mindset of it. So the logic is much more into the details because it's all about you being an artist. Okay, there are three different types of artists, only three. You are going to meet different types of artists. Okay, but are in terms of logic and process different. Then and sometimes you can switch in between our you being an artist and the way how you do it. So you can switch between experimental, consistent artists and foundational artists. Foundational artists use reference and not reference, but use their foundation much more rather than breaking those rules. So it's basically it's kind of like character design, you know. Some people cannot break easily those rules, which that's why what they are then, which is very foundational. They focus with very strong fundamentals on it. But that's what they make the suffer from design. But it can be fixed if they use that reference one to one and add it on top of it. Okay. So it can happen that you are not great at doing cartoonic type of stuff, but much more doing um realistic type of stuff, basically. So you cannot consistently experiment too much. Another thing what we have here, okay, let's actually sum it much more easier up. And after this one, we take a small break, okay? Because I'm sweating already. So experimental artists, what are those? They explore much more the outcome of um, this type of artist basically focuses on how much it can be different in shape, design, and logic. So basically, the entire problem-solving part is becomes like this. If it's a balloon, okay, let me say that Pennywise balloon, okay, all of a sudden it's this big, and what about this kind of shape? But then what about this kind of shape? Can a balloon be like this? And they're trying to figure it's way more easier to experiment like this, really fast bam, you know, like this. But it has something to do with being very experimental. Okay. The next thing is about being a consistent artist. And the consistent artist is much more about where you are specialized basically from. It's even written down here. Consistency is very important of an artist to draw the elements what they are specialized. So it can be also means you can be consistent at quality, you can be consistent at speed, or consistent at um, precision. So, but a consistent artist always chooses to draw the same thing, basically character or props. So it's kind of like in between those two, but it's still consistent because the majority of it are a bunch of characters. Just, but what I'm talking about here is much more the way how they process themselves. Okay, so this dude starts that the foundational artist starts, for example, with a lot of gestures, paints it incredibly well. Versus this guy tries to focus much more what is important about it. Versus this experimental artist tries to experiment literally everything about it. So even about how fat that character is, or for example, how the structure of maybe he puts even more than just two arms and two legs on it on this character, or maybe more than different kinds of blades. It's just about he tries to experiment a lot, and this is what you're going to meet in those kinds types of artists throughout the world. Because when you look at those artists, each of those have a different viewpoint in order to get the job done. Okay. The key element is logic. Understanding that artists break rules on purpose to accommodate beauty, expression, direction, shape, perspective, mindset to craft better results. Okay. And we take a small little break here about, let's just say, 5 minutes because it's already over an hour. So be right back in 5 minutes. Or we can do it with asking questions. Then after 5 minutes, okay. Okay. Does somebody has any questions before we continue? It just If I forget, English is my third language, okay? So I speak five languages, and that's the problem sometimes that my brain kind of thinks in all five languages. So it can happen that in terms of speech pattern, it's kind of hard to think. And I try to answer as best as possible. So any questions? Yeah, every student said that to me. Everybody of every at least my students said that it's okay. After 1 or 2 hours, that's a lot of information, and that's why I make it a little bit after this one much more relaxed, so that we can enjoy a small little video, basically how I design. Okay, and I explain basically my thought process then later on. So creating and experimenting in mind has been a problem, but it comes to the usage of it. Then you, as an artist, okay, when you use reference, it's much more about how you use them in terms of um, experimentation. When it comes to reference, how you see the shape, how you see the story after reference, how you see the design or the patterns of the design. Because what are, for example, in short term principle of design, if you see, it's basically a principles the way how we use the principles of design basically to execute shapes. And design is most of the time an arrangement of shapes or size or height or colors and so on. It could also be principles of composition sometimes, because most of the time they share the same principles together. But it's all about the biggest thing, which comes to the mindset about when you create an experiment and you gather references. Because most people actually under selling themselves in their mind. What I mean by that is they don't ask the possibility what if. Uh, which also leads to reference gathering is going to be a little bit of a big problem, because in terms of percentage, how much percentage are you going to use from the reference? So how much of percentage of your reference are you going to use? Sometimes it leads to the rest of the process and how you're going to create your piece. Example: this is reference plus design. The design part is that you do not need exactly the same reference, but kind of something. So it has kind of like a little bit of an inventive name, but it is the same shape. Some of those are the same colors, but we took it from 1 to 1, which means kind of like 99 percentage, which maybe 98 percentage, which is 2 percentage of because of this line and the colors. That's literally it. Um, which is kind of nice because you can. It's very beginner friendly. You can adjust the colors of it, and 100 percentage of reference usage for fashion, which means I if I invent, and if I invent based off of some shape, I need to have a very, very huge library in order to pull this off from a kiwi. When it comes to custom design, of course, because it plays a lot with your mindset, with your shape, and with your story. Because I need somehow to find maybe I think about here an element that has a big giant jewelry here or something like that. You know, when it comes to a headgear design, or when I think about uh this build up, I can maybe put more jewelry so that I make it maybe more consistent. But then there's this stuff that comes then later down the line when after you learn how to basically design it based off of an object. But we are not going to do this. Um, what's funny about it, in the eastern part of game development, and when I may say eastern, I mean sometimes Japan, most of the time Korean, and absolutely most of the time Chinese, because the Chinese people are basically not allowed to use reference of nude type of stuff and things, so they kind of use a lot of this kind of thing. So it's basically there is a rule there, but doesn't allow to use any nudity at all in the artistic world because yeah. It's only still if you want to one rip off their stuff as it is. Um, just to point this out, if it's from history, biology, if it's an animal, it's not stealing. Of course, you steal from those things, but the main point is nobody invented it, right? So it doesn't. It is not a painting, and it's not a 3D. It's a photo of an animal, and I can take it literal. So basic principle, it's not really stealing, but referencing it. Exactly. There's no author because if I draw a tiger, has somebody inter uh, has somebody actually what is it called if I want to sue somebody? But here it's kind of like a different word for it. Copyright, yes. So copyright. If nobody has a copyright over a tiger, okay. When I paint a tiger, nobody has it. When I paint, for example, airplanes, nobody has a copyright. When I paint a cast, nobody has a copyright. Armor stuff, regardless of it. Of course, you see the same thing kind of ish in different other designs because hey, we can only do so much as try to being a little bit inventive, but not too much because if it's a game based off history, of course nobody has an intellectual copyright on it or property basically, and that's the point. Stealing from history is long being not copyrighted. At least it depends on certain things because for example, the 15th centuries are not copyrighted at all. Just some work from Leonardo da Vinci and all that stuff. Basically, are not allowed to actually produce it in 3D, but when you paint it, it falls under fair use because it's a study and so on. And yeah, those are basically what I mean. Which we come to the next part. I talk now about the basic of design, how we design. So when I think about it, from the basis of, we try always to find shape, and mood. Then after it, one is the design, one is the principle of design. Here I try to find shape, and here I try to do patterns, or kind of like a hierarchical way of a pyramid character, basically. Whereas here I try to find, does this shape work this way or this way or this way, and so on. So when we follow it based of a base design is, we always try to find shape regardless of it. We can do it through design itself, from other material, or from the principles of inventing stuff. Okay. But we can also look at different types of cultures, how they were some things, and how um, they they play with it, or how they invented it, or what a knife for them is, and etc. Which means it's always the question about asking, is it cool? How does it feel? I basically, if I do a character design, I try to be him or this person, because is he angry? Is he, nice? Or is he much more about sad about certain situation? What is the problem about it? So yeah, from what I remember, elements such as buildings, ideas from nature, shape, object, creatures, etc., design choices, like why something is made that way and why materials. If you copy somebody's design and don't fully know or understand what informed the design decision, you won't know how to effectively use the design elements that you copied, and unlikely learn anything from. That's true, Lex. You basically don't learn anything if you copy it, but rather than you study him. As if it's a very professional artist, you study from. But later on, you probably realize then, hey, wait a minute, I saw those kinds of buildings somewhere, and then you find exactly the exact picture, and it's literally a copy one to one. It's just he painted it that way. So, right, but I do all the time when I study an artist. I also dissect what they used as a reference. I also dissect what kind of brushes did they use, and I also dissect how they started, how they kind of ended up in which kind of different scenario, and how they finished it. What kind of brushes did they use in which kind of different ways? Because sometimes I see 5 to 10 brushes, and then I understand, okay, he's much more the experimental artist who tries to experiment with a lot of brushes rather than the consistent one but just uses one brush or two. But if it comes to concept art, copying a design is not really good. And matter of fact, it is bad. Why should they hire you over the other guy? And that's my viewpoint, basically. A matter of fact, I catch certain people when I got their portfolios as a review when I was art directing. And I saw some of those people literally copying or taking somebody else's artwork in order to showcase it. Even despite the fact there were studies, we don't usually accept that, and so on. Anyway, let's go much more back. It's all about the logic in it. They can be inspired by other artists as long as the clothes are different. The art style can be the same as another artist. It's totally fine because art style is an end result. We don't treat it as a design itself. Now, if it looks similar to a red hair, and I saw this 15 times, that's normal. so you don't need to sweat it. The most important thing is about, is the costume great? Is the headgear nice? Or what does she has on the on the arms and legs? Does she has the types of cloth? What is this one? A dress? Yeah, does she has a dress with a big giant rose here? What does she has? And so on, etc. But my main point, what I try to tell you is, it does. If you are getting inspired based off an artist, that's totally fine. Nobody has an issue with it. If you take reference, for example, from perspective or from the colors from somebody else's art, that's totally fine. Nobody just judges you. But the design itself should be invented, which means cloth design. Or number two, you can take, if you use artistic reference, make sure you just take one thing from it. Okay. It can be inspired, it can be the pose, because everybody has the same kind of pose. I never saw an artist that doesn't have a different pose, but you always see the same kind of poses over the internet all the time. It's basically they use the same references. Exactly. I agree with that. As long as it's something that you try to invent. For example, imagine 2B, which is for Nier Automata, in a different design. If you redesign her entire costume, as an example, it's totally fine because companies actually love that, as a matter of fact. They love redesigns. And then maybe hire you based off of that. But anyway, logic is the key. Does it work? Does it make sense? If yes, how? You always going to question in terms of design, your logic, your physics of the world, and your philosophy. Okay. It's all about understanding, does it work, and why does it work? Okay. Or sometimes it's just cool, because there are different kinds of companies. Some companies want more freedom, some companies want less freedom. Okay, so if they want it much more logical, I need to think all the time about, does it make sense? If they want much more weird physics, I need to think about weird physics in the environment, and so on. So that's why when it comes to the process, it's about creation, ideas, problem solving, um, storytelling, solution, and logic. So, because you create something, and let's say we create a character, and it's kind of like a free two-layer stage of it. Then we create a character design. Is it cool? Is it sexy? What kind of storytelling is it? What's the style of it? What's the personality? Which country does it came from? What's the time zone of the country? And I don't talk about literally the time zone. I talk about, is it in the 90s or 80s? So when it comes to the categorical thing, here's a hunter. I wrote literally the wrong word for it. So here's a hunter. And what does he do? Hunts the dark dreams. So in terms of shapes, he is kind of like a grim reaper. So I managed to pull in terms maybe of those three things that what he kind of is in terms of design, silhouette, and so on. Maybe on this one, because I can can push different elements. Okay, we have already time because it's dark, so people sleeping. We have the cool thing is he hunts stuff, and then This one is sometimes we have this, but not always. I think you can use the same concept, but make sure the of it follow your original ideas and it's not Frankenstein mods and the different ideas that don't fit. Uh okay, if you ask 100 people to design Frankenstein, it always comes different out, regardless of it. Unless you use the reference one to one. And if you give everybody the same references, you kind of get a percentage of 50% percentage, I would guess. Unless they are the experimental artists and just don't care and glance over the reference, you're not going to get at least 50 percentage of people not going to create the same Frankenstein. Which also comes to when we receive feedback, by the way, in terms of inventing, because then we produce stuff. Okay. And I kind of forgot to mention that I usually get a brief. Okay. And this is literal how it kind of works. Not literal, but take it with a grain of salt because many companies work different. But usually this is how it works immediately on in 2 weeks after you read the entire everything what has to do with paperwork. Maybe less than 2 weeks, maybe 3 or 4 days. But yeah, usually how the production works, you get your brief, get a reference, director comes in, looks at the reference, what's the idea, it gives you feedbacks on the idea, and then you iterate this idea basically. So, or it could be also the lead here, because usually all of those three people um, are going at you and complaining sometimes it's off or wrong or it works, and that's why we showcase actually how we usually present something. Okay, um, when I work for a company, I have two types of different reference ways of getting. The one way where nobody should see it, and one way where everybody should see it, where it's much more simple, kind of nice approach, but also kind of crazy. So, for example, this type of thing. This is for me. I can gather and reference a lot of things about the boots and how I want my design to be. Okay. I'm never going to show this to anybody, but I'm going to show everybody something else, which is this one. If I can find it. Come on. Is this one? No, it's not. I wish I didn't have so many. Oh yeah, okay. It's kind of this, but half of it. I usually kill, kill off and put the important reference here. So actually, I show them only this. Okay. Or a few of this. What kind of ideas maybe I've thought about a shape or thing, or what are the props ideas? What I'm going to do maybe when it comes of it. But this is basically how I want to capture as simple as possible that it's kind of like a war in heaven, and this dude is kind of like a gentleman-ish thing in terms of concept art. But the feeling is much more very dark. So it's a demon, basically. And they said, okay, you should do it as a female. Okay. So he wants a vampire hunter or something like that. And yeah, that probably could look cool. So a lot of uh different types of costumes and leather workage and all that stuff, which kind of went crazy basically. Okay. But just saying half of it you don't need to show to the directors. Just it really depends that you simplify, you present even your reference in a presentation, which also leads to the exact right feedback, because sometimes you can get more feedback and you receive more problems which um, we don't not find the solution, and then we also say, okay, what's the solution, right? And that's the reason why, which leads now to the biggest thing about the process of design. Okay, design, prompt, brief. This is much more literal how I work basically around it. So I do usually I get a prompt or make a brief about it. Um, then I design the idea. Is it character design? If yes, ask the 5 week questions. Um, then go through those stages and answer my questions basically in what's the shape language, the culture about it, the heritage, the aesthetic, because in character design you can even add more. So it's not only that simple words what are well rounded in the previous one, which is hold on. It's somewhere here. Oh yeah, here. It's not always this one for character design. Okay. So aesthetic can be here, just saying. And many other words. It's just for you to figure out and try to find design in the most easiest possible way. So the aesthetic is noble vampire, dark anger, soft but sharp when it comes to dangerous shapes, because that's what I chose. In terms of heritage, it's kind of like a nomad. The feeling is much more wrath, so burning blood, and so on. And as soon as I gather it, I do my research. I do a reference board, a shape. I mean, this is everything when it comes down to writing, of course. But the most important thing is, does this solve your problems? Then later on, because as you know, research board, shape, language, design. Okay, I got my reference, but you should always check mark yourself and ask yourself, okay, does it make sense? Should I solve this problem maybe in a different way when the reference doesn't look at all like the design what I wanted to do? Because there's a difference between what you want to do and what you need to do, or something like that. Okay. So the main point why you always try to think how to solve this problem is much more, is the research a problem? Is the idea a problem? Because when it comes to the brief, they tell you a lot of the worst things possible. It can be as limited as possible, but also as demanding as possible. Or they can be complete the opposite of it. They just want you to invent those types of weird creatures, basically, but are in the dark or in the sun. So yeah. So But I try to find when it comes to feeling. Okay, because if we look here, it's all about feeling, and when we try to figure out our character design. Okay, it's all about overall composition of it. I can think of if I make the canvas very red or dark or something like that, where I put maybe some horror stuff in it, but it can be only on the composition side maybe. So I rely basically on the principle of design that anger means triangle and it means danger. So a lot of spikes are going to happen into the costume design, for example. Whereas in principle of composition, I can use the composition in order to set those spikes up in a better arrangement. So it's always going to be like a triangular thing, maybe cut into the dress. And let me say this is the belt, this is the dress here, and then it goes further like this only. So we have a lot of designs in terms of composition or design principles like that, which makes it a lot more easier for me to think because as long as I keep my design principles in mind, I have a easier time to design. And I don't try to be always inventive because that's why you can think only for 4 hours. Okay. And you can learn only for two if you listen, and if you can only write as much down as for 3 hours, or maybe more. Depends, of course, how much focus you have. But the most important thing is to find, you can find all of those things, feeling, heritage, culture, how you set up the culture, in different principles of design and compositions. So if I want to set something up, um, the composition or the design always going to help me, at least in the principles, how I going to adjust it or set it up. It could be the feeling, it could be the mood, the heritage. But this much more explains what they are basically, because mood is means over a sense of color and expression. This is the feeling means basically over a composition. How dangerous it's going to look. This is what is so dangerous about it. Wrath means red, which is blood, or it can, or it's fire, so it means anger. That's it. That is an expression, right? So we most of the time associate negative and positive colors to expression, and if you look color expression, positive and negative, you kind of find a citation about it when it comes to design principles in order to find your design. Which is heritage is a different thing. It's much more about in terms of storytelling. Heritage is storytelling. Okay. Despite the fact sometimes we write down storytelling because it has also to do with their backgrounds. Okay. So, or the present, but she's doing right now. That's why here storytelling doesn't need to be written, but it can written two different things at the same time in heritage, which leads to storytelling. And because of those two things, especially this one, she's a nomad. Which is when we think about the process of how you gather everything, means, and this is what I do usually when it comes to a normal production. Okay, um, I get a brief, I do the research about it, and I read 10, 20 times so that I'm absolutely sure that I get it. And then I iterate and design on it. And then I think, and then I do again a research. That is everything on Monday. If I need to work for it, it's literally like 7, 8 hours on Monday. If they expand, because I already finished everything and I tried as many pages as to do in one day. Um, there was this one Chinese company who wanted for me 10 concepts, which is kind of ridiculous. But literal, I tried to design stuff like here, just to make myself prepared, ready for the character, basically. Then I make a bunch. The back side of it, just preparing. It's a lot of setup, basically. Or sometimes I even, when I warm myself up with gestures, I just take simply the gesture drawing. And you'll see a bunch of pages about presentations like this. And then here the weapon. And they said they have a pistol sword or something like that, and it shoots. There should be a pistol here, maybe. It just set up of a shape. And this looks like this. I know exactly that I want to push it here. The pistol thing. But it's helmets, expressions. So everything is kind of like a setup like this. But then it's character design in terms of shapes. So I can basically copy this character here, then copy it over like 5 times. And then I already set up my canvas for the first concept, basically. And I can push here all of the rest of the props what this person is going to have in order to make everything. So I separate some of the props what we do for concepts so that they understand it perfectly what they are in terms of objects, and then I readjust them and make a new page and then just copy it over so that I can describe what every single object is and what it does. It makes then even more sense for it, because if it's something important what needs to be on the back, I has to do it here somewhere. It makes even more sense. Or maybe I just push it here somewhere. Because most directors and leads and the creative director, he at least from my experience, they always want everything in one page. And I need to figure out, okay, this is the first concept, and they are so of me 5 within. Hello? Hello? Sound went away. And where was I? I was I on Tuesday here? Okay, 10 seconds, good. So it's basically on Tuesday. I asked myself a lot of questions. I tried literally to be that character, or that I try literally to immerse myself into the world if it's an environment. And if it's a prop, I try to understand how does it feel like. If it's a creature, I try to understand how it behaves. So I ask a lot of questions within an hour and think about how it moves, what it does, what does it work, and explore much more than the idea what I did here in this one, and change a lot of shapes up, quite a lot. And it comes to a page which is in a page, there can be 20, 30 of those in 2, 3 hours. So I basically did 30 characters in 2, 3 hours. It is just to understand shapes and how it works in terms of shapes exploration, but in all together, it helps you really well out to understand your own problems and the problems what you have in terms of design. It's because of this. The nice thing is you get the feedback part, and then all of those questions what you had is going to be answered anyway, and you maybe tell when it comes to the idea um, and the feedback what you got, you can also give yourself an input and ask them, what if we do it this way, but it should be like this, and the feeling should be much more like this and that, and so on, so that they don't blind fire you into refining, because everything is about soft skills and hard skills. Okay, soft skills means communication and all that stuff. Are you a good communicator? So when it comes to feedback on Wednesday, usually it's on Tuesday, but it really depends. Okay, because they are it's always sometimes in stress, but not really though, because it's very stressful. I kind of imagine to think of it. I have the easiest job. I paint. I do art. I mean, other people have it way more harder than me. So why do I complain for a little bit of a deadline, tough deadline? So I always think that way. So yeah, and I think that's the beauty about it when it comes to working. If you work together with people and you get your feedback and refinements, you have a lot more easier. I mean, if you get your feedback and your questions asked and chill out with them, that's perfect. It is basically a perfect environment. Um, yeah. The next thing is refining on Thursday, and on Friday I already make the presentation and then submit it. There are two different paths. Um, because I worked in the game industry, many people don't understand the difference between an artist, what works, and an artist, what doesn't work. Okay. And from my experience, I understand that pride is a very, very huge thing, which creates a bigger ego because some people paint better or draw better than them. But that doesn't mean anything because why does that other guy then has a job, right? But the main thing what you guys should understand here on this presentation when it comes to that, it's all about understanding why you need those technical skills. And and if you guys never worked on a project with somebody, you kind of not understanding it, but it's much more pushing all of these elements and criteria and technical skills together, because understanding something is different also with experience, right? And for example, you got your reference and put something together, right? Which is kind of like a wrist, and you want to then to draw from imagination. So 25% of your reference you're going to use, and then 75% of your brain, and then all of a sudden it backfires. And then yeah, in the end you don't get hired, and you ask yourself, why do I not get hired? Well, basically, it's because the way how okay, after probably after my 50 years per portfolio, I realized a pattern where it came to um the same thing over and over again has been presented to me. There's nothing fresh, no fresh idea and so on, but those are not the people what I need. if I have work in a sci-fi project and I see I need draftsman people, art surface people, okay, but only fantasy stuff happens, and and I see only portfolios about fantasy stuff. That is a really bad sign because I want sci-fi people, but if sci-fi people don't get into the studio, so I need to literal, then it's better to get applications than go to the applicants and ask them, hey, do you want to work with them? Because now we need them, you know. But the companies always they do all the time that thing. If you apply, they have you in the list because you applied, and that's how, in terms of mindset, they have because they have you in that list, you applied basically again, and now they have all of your information, and they can always write you back even after a year or two or three. They kind of all the time look into your portfolio and see that takes your advantage away basically, but it is how it is. This is how the process of walking into the game industry, movie industry, and animation industry works. So that you, it's a little bit kind of like that, but not all the way though. Okay, just take it with a grain of salt because the producer told one of the producer told me about it, how this process kind of works when it comes to the hireable process, because we don't want advantage, and the company should defend you and secure you from the company and from yourself, and you should be safe from the company in terms of rights and in terms of creating an advantage towards you. So yeah, and we still have two kind of presentation. This is much more about your intention, how you sketch it. So it has nothing to do really with design or painting, but it has much more to do how you can maybe approach design. Okay, so or there's another one about line arts, how you can push your line art much more into a better direction, because um some people tend to, for example, use eraser in a different way or draw with different types of brushes. So I did basically the small presentation for you as a bonus, and yeah. So let's actually take it to the next level, and let me show you the first process. Do you guys want environment to see or much more character when it comes to concept art? It is just the first process, by the way, because environment is much okay. I do a poll. How can I do this? Okay, vote, and meanwhile I take a break because my food actually hurts. Okay, let me just open the video. Oh my god, okay, it's more than just an hour. Okay, this is 48, this is 40. Okay, I couldn't record it everything because the record didn't broke. But it is literally 48 minutes. That is totally okay because we are close to finishing it up. Anyway, it's already been over 3 hours, and I was planning to do that for two. But yeah, it just take everything with a grain of salt because not everything works in production. Sometimes the things what I said you need to adjust it in your own accordance. And terminology is a thing sadly, and mindset is also a thing you when you work for example Epic Games, it's not going to be exactly like Blizzard.